Good evening once again and a very warm welcome to Rwanda Television News. My name is Gloria Mutesi. Rwanda's government has once again noted that the Duclair report on France's role in the 1994 genocide that was perpetrated against the Tutsi is a step in the right direction if the two countries are to build bilateral relations based on truth. The observation was made on Friday as the man who led the commission that prepared the report presented it to President Paul Kagame. Serge Nore starts us off tonight Bulletin with this.
The French historian Professor Vincent Duclair presented the report to Rwanda's head of state at Village Rugwiro. Afterwards, he expressed his pride at what he and his team had accomplished by gathering information on the facts surrounding France's role in the genocide that was perpetrated against the Tutsi here in Rwanda 27 years ago, stressing that the evidence cannot be disputed and that the government of his country at the time played a direct role in that tragedy because it decided to blindly support President Juvenal Habyarimana's regime, despite the fact that Rwanda's murderous leaders of the time were preparing a genocide. The professor also noted that it is a shame that there are those that are still trying to debate over what the genocide against the Tutsi should be called, despite the truth in the French government archives he and his colleagues on the commission saw with their own eyes. French documentation indicates that the evidence was in all likelihood ignored by France's leadership at the time, especially President François Mitterrand and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The documents clearly show that there was a plan for genocide, a plan to kill the Tutsi in 1990, 92 and 93. That has nothing to do with tribes turning against each other. It is therefore important to stress that French government archives clearly state that a genocide occurred and that it was perpetrated against the Tutsi. Also, the atrocities that took place have nothing to do with the RPF's offensive because they were committed in government-controlled areas. Those documents, written at the time and now in government archive storage, utterly destroy any notions of a double genocide, which is why it is important to stress that the source of this information is in itself French, reiterating the reality of the genocide against the Tutsi. Professor Duclair also noted that an important lesson had been learned back in 1994 when Rwanda was liberated.
Le président Paul Kagame a dit quelque chose d'extrêmement important que l'on oublie toujours.
President Paul Kagame said something very important that we tend to ignore. When the RPF took power and established a government on the 4th of July, it was the first time that the will and intention to stop a genocide was observed. Never in history had this been the intention of any army anywhere in the world until that time.
La lutte contre un génocide n'a jamais été une priorité militaire. Et là, avec effectivement l'action du Front Patriotique.
Stopping the genocide was the RPF's primary objective, and that was so important. No one today should be ashamed of admitting that that was a lesson Rwanda taught France and Europe. Rwanda's government has again noted that the Duclair report on France's role in the 1994 genocide that was perpetrated against the Tutsi is a step in the right direction if the two countries are to build bilateral relations based on truth. It was a courageous decision France's president made by instructing that the report be prepared. It is therefore an important report when it comes to Rwanda-France bilateral relations because seeing eye to eye on this history is vital. There can be no disparities, and now that report shows that they did play a role in what happened. Both countries can now forge relations based on the truth that was exposed by the report of that commission. Another report is soon to be issued by Rwanda as well. Rwanda's report will soon be complete and made public. Even though it is not yet complete, we can tell you that it complements this report. They do not contradict each other because both detail what happened. There may be a few small details that may appear in one report and not the other, depending on what either side saw, but the reports most certainly complement each other. There are no contradictions. The Duclair Commission was formed back in 2018 and its report was first made public on the 28th of March this year. On Wednesday, when commemoration activities began, marking 27 years since the genocide against the Tutsi, President Paul Kagame reiterated that Rwanda has welcomed the Duclair report.
Health experts believe that the reason for the rise in the number of COVID-19 infections upcountry is because they have become complacent in respecting their prevention guidelines, saying that COVID-19 is for the elites. And health experts have said that for these numbers to go down, stringent measures should be taken to fight the virus. Residents around the city of Kigali are happy with the declining numbers of COVID-19 infections, so much that they are confident that their efforts to fight it will intensify. An example is the Ejo Heza market in Nyarugenge, where everyone is supposed to be wearing a face mask and wash their hands before accessing the market, have their temperature taken, as well as observing social distancing.
Wear your mask properly and please observe social distancing. COVID-19 is not yet over, and that is why we continue to adhere to the prevention guidelines. As you come into the market, please do what has brought you and leave after, as well as continue to put in effort to adhere to the guidelines.
The secretary of this market, Mukaneza Asuma, says they won't let people become complacent. As leaders, we keep checking in on them to see who has worked when it's not their turn. But now the traders have started adopting to this mechanism of if they've worked today, they know tomorrow they won't come in. Dr. Vedaste Ndahindwa says the reason for the sharp increase in the number of COVID-19 infections in the districts with a decrease in Kigali is because people in the province call it a disease for Kigali residents only.
In most cases, the COVID-19 were seen in some peripheral district as a disease for Kigali city. And they were not really following properly the measures that were given by the government. So this is the consequence of that. So I encourage everyone to follow properly guidelines that were put in place, washing hands frequently, using water and soap, and also using alcoholic rub. Hand washing facilities have to be established everywhere, so to facilitate people to get access to hand washing facilities, and also respect distancing, social distancing, as it was advised.
The Minister of Health, Dr. Daniel Ngamije, cautions everyone to protect themselves so that Rwanda doesn't become like other countries in the region, with a spike in infections prompting a lockdown.
There are other countries in the region that have started having a spike in the infections, or what you can call the third wave. So we have concerns, and we are working towards respecting all measures in place so that we avoid the increase in infections in the country. Stopping the spread of the pandemic is everyone's responsibility. It should not be forceful, but it should be everyone's initiative so that we do not get overwhelmed in the hospital or even take extreme measures, such as total lockdown like we have seen in the past.
The city of Kigali and other parts of the country were hit hard by the escalation of the COVID-19 pandemic, which led to lockdown and saw a ban on travel between Kigali and other provinces. At the beginning of this year, 2021, the city of Kigali was put under lockdown due to the fact that the city alone accounted for 62% of the total number of people infected with the pandemic and 65.5% of the total number of deaths due to the virus between December 2020 and January 2021. On December 31st last year, among the 4,332 tests that had been conducted, 97 positive cases were identified in Kigali, while in districts in the southern province like Huye district, 3 positive cases were identified. Of the 5,266 tests that were conducted this Wednesday, 13 infections were identified in Kigali, with 62 in Huye and 46 in Nyamagabe district. Children born to women who were raped during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis say although their upbringing was difficult, as time goes by, life is getting better as they continue to heal from their childhood. The names of the characters in this report have been altered to protect their identities. When I remember that no one is left on both my mother and father's sides, I feel so much pain and sorrow. She says those who killed her family also raped her when she was 25 years old, at that time during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, and later found out she was pregnant. We were raped. There was no one to call on for help. I discovered later that I was pregnant and I couldn't tell who the father was. When the time came, I gave birth. This woman, who is now visually impaired, says during the first years she didn't love her child. This is something her child affirms as well. I never played with my child like normally parents would play with their babies. Never did I feel that way in my heart. Her child, whom we named Kazungu, is now almost graduating at 27 years of age. He says his mother's hatred was due to the way he was conceived, and it was obvious to him. He says he was often lied to by his mother each time he asked her about his origin. Each time I asked her who my father was, she would tell a name of my uncle, to a point when I had to fill in school forms in primary. On the part where I had to write my father's name, she would come up with different names every term, and I finished primary with about 12 different names of my father. He says he finally got to know about his origin after his mother told him. His mother says she is proud of what her son has achieved so far, despite the upbringing amidst difficult times. One of my achievements is being an excellent student in school, because if I'd focused on my background, then it would have distorted me, since I don't have a father to do or to say anything to me in case I perform poorly. This also happened to a one Diana and her mother, who says she was also raped multiple times during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. She explained how she later discovered that she was pregnant. That family was full of Interahamwe from the first to the last born. They were all educated and well known up to this moment, if I could mention their names. From them, that's why I had whispers that I'm pregnant. I realized it later on. The thing all these children have in common is the pain of constantly being lied to by their parents about their origin at an early age. As we know, when a child starts school, he or she is often asked about his or her parents or where they come from. During all that time, my mom had never told me anything of that. As I continued to grow up, I kept on asking her who my father was, and she kept on telling me that she shall tell me someday. As I kept insisting, she told me that my grandfather's name. Although after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, their parents and the rest of the family members didn't love them, after they healed from the traumas, they began to be grateful they're alive and proud of what they had become. A coordinator of Sevota, Godeliva Mukasarasi, one of the organizations that were established shortly after the genocide against the Tutsi with the purpose to care for the genocide survivors, says that women who suffer from such trauma are treated and they do heal from it. We are happy to see them recover from their traumas, although they never go away completely, but they manage to control them. As they live well with the society and their relationship with their children also keeps getting better. They've also managed to contribute to the development of the country without constantly suffering from mental or other diseases like before, and they are now involved in many sectors. The Sevotha organization has managed to treat over 400 women with such traumas, with 100 still recovering. Experts in the history of genocide say that rape is one of the most powerful weapons which were used during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, and that those who were victims of rape require to be treated with greater discretion. 27 years after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, relatives and other local residents in the area where Thomas Nahimana was born a man that denies and negates the genocide that was perpetrated against the Tutsi, have denounced his ideologies and say they are focusing on their peace and development efforts. The area in question is in Rwanda's western province, Rusizi district, Nzahaha sector, Chijenje cell in the settlement of Chiragizwa. Thomas Nahimana has repeatedly made statements abroad denying and negating the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, and people in his home area say they want nothing to do with him. Nahimana's home area is also the place Faustine Twagiramungu was born, another man that negates and denies the genocide against the Tutsi. Both men are currently in Europe. Now, as Rwanda is currently commemorating for the 27th time the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, psychologists believe that music as a form of art plays an important role in the emotional journey of genocide survivors, and that it's one of the most effective remedies for their trauma from the genocide.
The message in a song can be a helpful, complementary one because the different songs we listen to have different messages, with some comforting and reminding you that you are not alone, which indeed creates a sense of confidence and comfort that you aren't alone at a time when someone is going through grief and feels like there is no one for them or no one loves them. The messages in different songs can be a cure for all these feelings.
BPR Bank has remembered its employees who lost their lives in the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi and inaugurated a memorial monument that lists their names. The bank employees who survived the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi are happy that they've been able to rebuild their lives. BPR employees who survived the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, as well as the children of former bank employees who were killed in the genocide, point out the hard times they went through and say the bank has tried to support the families of the survivors in their efforts to rebuild their lives. Where Rwanda is headed is a good direction because today there is hope of life. I was a child when the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi happened, but I had to grow up. Coming from having a whole big family to having none at all, life came to a standstill. I'm happy that I work in a place where my father used to work, and I can feel his presence here. In honor of up to the 33 bank employees that lost their lives during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, a memorial monument was inaugurated at the headquarters of the bank. The chief business officer of BPR, Shema Mugisha, says they will continue to fight genocide ideologies and its negation and denial.
This memorial, we believe, will be a sign of remembrance for all the family members lost that we used to work with and also contribute to fighting the genocide ideology and denial as we continue to work for a peaceful and unified country.
Ibuka, the umbrella organization of Genocide Survivors Association, notes that the fact that both public and private institutions have established memorial monuments is a good way to preserve the history of the genocide. In order to help the families of the former employees of the bank, tuition fees for at least 22 people have been paid, and 3 of them have graduated and have been employed by the bank. So it's a pleasure to have your company as we commemorate for the 27th time the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Let's remember, unite and renew our commitment to never again. Stay well and stay safe. God bless you and keep you. And until next time, I'm Gloria Mutesi.